When you discover fairy tales or lies, the pain cuts deeper for having believed them in the first place. That's how Serena's stories start. The day the tax collector comes to their cottage is the day fairy tales prove to be lies. They'd been Serena's refuge since childhood. These stories of common girls rescued by handsome princes, of magic transforming the ordinary into extraordinary. Growing up, she'd clung to the foolish hope that perhaps a kind fairy would come help her one day, that someday her empty womb would quicken with life, that the shame of her barrenness would transform into the joy of motherhood. But hope was a treacherous thing, as it turned out, because when it's finally crushed, you suffer not just the pain of your circumstances, but the ache of having dared to dream at all. Chapter 1. The tax collector's golden eyes shone in the dim light of their cottage, his huge body blocking the sunlight from the doorway. Serena watched from the shadows as her father held Aurora tight against his chest, protecting her younger sister as if the beta wolf might grab her at any moment, which wasn't far from the truth. The taxes have doubled this season, the beta's voice rumbled through their tiny home. By order of Alpha King Darius. Serena's father shook with fear. Like everyone in their village, human and shifter alike, he was terrified of the king. Stories spread throughout the kingdom about Darius's cruelty, how even other wolves feared him. At least shifters had some protection under pack law. Humans were basically property, servants to be used and thrown away. And Serena, she was considered even worse than human. Born to shift her parents, but unable to shift herself. She was her family's shame twice over. First for being wolfless, then for being barren, cast off by her mate after 5 years of failed attempts to conceive. Her father had taken her back with bitter reluctance, another mouth to feed with no dowry to show for it. The village whispered that her defects ran deeper than anyone had known. "My lord," her father's voice cracked, "we've had a poor harvest. If you could grant us more time, you know the penalty for failing to pay." The beta's eyes fixed on Aurora, who whimpered and pressed closer to their father. "The king requires new slaves. This one will do nicely." Serena's body tensed. Everyone knew what happened to King Darius's slaves. They disappeared into his dark castle and were never seen again. But she's promised to be mated. Their father protested. "She has a strong wolf. She'll bear powerful cubs for the pack." He stopped suddenly, and Serena's heart sank as his gaze darted to where she stood in the shadows. "Take my eldest daughter instead." The beta sneered. "You offer the king a defective half-breed." "She's already proven useless for breeding," her father said, the words hitting Serena like physical blows. Her own mate cast her off. "She's perfect for a slave. Practically human already and barren. Besides, no loss to the pack. No loss to the pack." The beta repeated cruelly. "But then what gain to the king? She tells stories." Aurora blurted out, then shrank back from the beta's sharp glance. "Beautiful stories." Serena closed her eyes briefly. How many times had they mocked her storytelling? Called it a shameful human habit beneath the dignity of their kind. Yet now they offered it up like a prize, the only value they could find in their broken daughter. "Show him, Serena." Her father grabbed her arm, shoving her to her knees. "Tell him yourself." Serena lifted her head slowly. At least as a slave, she thought with bitter clarity. No one would expect her to bear children she could never give them. "I would be honored to serve Alpha King Darius in any way he wishes, my lord," she said. The beta studied her for a long time. There was something calculating in his gaze that made her skin crawl. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, the defective one will do." Outside, he shifted into his massive wolf form, dark fur gleaming in the afternoon sun. As they left her village behind, Serena didn't look back at her family. She'd learned long ago that stories were the only escape that mattered. Tonight, in her cell, she'd imagine a story where her family saved her, where her sister fought for her, where her father regretted his choice, where being different didn't mean being broken, where a woman's worth wasn't measured by the children she could bear. She was good at making up happy endings, even if they never came true. Especially because they never came true. When the sun rose, Serena caught her first glimpse of Alpha King Darius's castle. Towering against the bright morning sky, its white marble towers shone in the sunlight. It was more stunning than anything she could have imagined. Yet, its flawless appearance made her uneasy. She knew from stories that breathtaking beauty often hid dark secrets. The beta wolf who brought her there shifted back into human form and grabbed her arm. "Move," he ordered, leading her not through the grand entrance, but down a narrow side path beneath the castle. They entered through a servant's entrance, going deep underground to a chilly stone chamber where 5 other girls huddled together, all looking scared. Serena kept her face blank. She refused to let them see her fear. "Strip," a stern woman with grey hair and amber wolf eyes commanded. Now the girls hesitated. "You're the king's property," the woman snapped. "What you thought was yours, including your dignity, belongs to him." One by one, they removed their clothes, shivering in the cold. Serena moved methodically, folding her clothes neatly, refusing to show her humiliation. "Into the washing chamber," the woman directed them next. They were led into another room where servants doused them with ice-cold water. Serena gasped as the first bucket hit her, the shock of it stealing her breath. Rough hands scrubbed every inch of her skin with coarse soap until it felt raw. Her hair was washed twice, then combed painfully to remove every tangle. "The king won't have dirty village filth in his castle," the gay-haired woman explained, watching their discomfort with clear enjoyment. "Though I doubt any of you will last the month. You're hardly the beauties he usually prefers." One girl began to cry silently. "Save your tears," the woman sneered. "King Darius is not known for mercy. Learn your place quickly or face punishment." They were given plain grey shifts to wear and instructed on castle rules, who to speak to, where not to go, and the consequences of disobedience. "Tonight," the woman's voice dropped, "one of you will serve the king's special guest." The way she said special guest made Serena's stomach knot. Images flashed through her mind, being thrown to hungry wolves, offered as some kind of sacrifice. "The king himself will select which of you has the honor," the woman concluded, looking them over like meat at market. "You'll be presented to him shortly. Try not to embarrass yourselves." They were led up a narrow staircase to a small antechamber with a polished floor. Told to line up and keep their eyes downcast, they waited in tense silence. From beyond the door came the sounds of approaching footsteps. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The severe woman who had been tormenting them moments before went rigid, her earlier confidence evaporating. A hand pressed roughly on the back of Serena's neck, forcing her head lower. "His Majesty, Alpha King Darius," announced a voice. The marble floor beneath Serena's bare feet seemed to vibrate with each step he took as he moved closer. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, but the air grew heavy, charged with power that pressed against Serena's skin like a physical touch. "The new arrivals, Your Majesty," said a male voice, tight with deference. "For your special guest's requirements." A long silence followed. Serena could hear the frightened breathing of the girls beside her, one of them trembling so violently that Serena could feel it through the floor. "They're all cowering," came a deep voice that resonated through Serena's very bones. It held neither cruelty nor compassion, just a weary disappointment, as though this was exactly what he'd expected. "How tiresome," the king added. Something in that voice, its casual power, its inherent command, made it impossible for Serena not to look. In all the books she'd secretly hoarded and read by candlelight, kings and princes were described with such grandeur. She'd always wondered if real royalty could possibly live up to the heroes of legend. Despite her fear, curiosity won out. Slowly, against every instinct for self-preservation, she raised her eyes. What she saw made every literary hero in her memory fade to pale imitation. Alpha King Darius wasn't merely handsome. He was sublime in a way that made her storyteller's mind scramble for comparisons. She found none to be adequate. Broader than her village's Alpha, with high cheekbones that could cut glass and lips that held a natural curve suggesting perpetual mockery, he was of a savage beauty that no artist could truly capture. But his eyes, gods, something ancient and feral lived in those eyes. And suddenly those eyes snapped to hers. Serena jerked her gaze back to the floor, heart hammering against her ribs. "Your Majesty," prompted the attendant. "Have you made your selection?" Serena felt rather than saw his attention still on her await that pinned her in place. "She'll do," he said simply. She knew without looking that he was pointing at her. Serena stood before the massive oak door, her heart pounding. The air felt colder here, as if winter clung to the stone. Torches flickered eerily, their flames bending away from the door like they were trying to escape. Next to her, the stern servant woman smirked, though her hands shook slightly. "Please the king's guest, however he desires," she whispered. "Or tomorrow. You'll face something far worse." Her voice faltered on the word guest. The guard at the door looked nervous, too, his forehead slick with sweat despite the cold. When Serena caught his eye, he looked away quickly, hand tightening on his sword. From inside the room, a sound echoed somewhere between a growl and a sigh that seemed to resonate through the door. The guard's grip whitened. Then he pushed Serena into the room. But it was more than just a room. It was a vast suite. The air inside was thick with a mix of scents, spices, flowers, and something wilder. Musk, blood, and the sharp tang of magic. A mirror caught Serena's eye, but when she turned to face it, her reflection wavered as though reluctant to take shape. She swallowed hard. "Is anybody there?" she asked. Someone was watching. She felt it, an unseen gaze, heavy as a touch. In the shadows, something moved just at the edge of sight. She took a step forward, then another, and suddenly saw a banquet spread out on a large table. Roasted meats, bowls of colorful fruits, and golden candelabras casting dim light that couldn't chase away the dark corners. Serena didn't dare touch anything. Instead, she moved toward the back of the room where thick velvet curtains hung. Pulling them back, she stopped cold at what she saw. A huge bed filled the space, absurdly wide and covered with silk sheets. The setup was clear now, the knowing looks from the servants, the uneasy guard, the lavish meal, and this gigantic bed. Good grief, she was to be used. She was expected to lie with this special guest to offer her body to whoever the king hosted here. Her stomach lurched violently and she pressed a hand to her mouth. But then a package resting atop the bed caught her eye. It caught her eye because on it is a card with her name scrolled in elegant script. With dread pooling in her gut, she unwrapped the parcel. A gown spilled into her hands, midnight dark and shimmering with gold thread. Beautiful, horrifyingly so, like a shroud made of stars. The air dropped to an icy chill as though darkness itself was swallowing it whole. A sound echoed from behind, slow, deliberate footsteps, the scrape of claws on stone, joints popping, shifting, and a low, menacing groan quickly stifled. Serena turned. The shadows thickened. A void swallowing light. "Put it on," she then heard. The voice, deep, inhuman, vibrated through her bones. It was language forced through a throat not meant for speech. Swallowing hard, she retreated behind a dressing screen, her fingers fumbling with the gown's fastenings. The fabric slithered over her skin like cool water. She found a necklace waiting, a collar of diamond stars. "Should I wear this too?" she whispered. Silence. Then closer now. Yes. Serena clasped it around her throat. The weight was suffocating. She stepped from behind the screen. The dining room seemed empty, but the presence remained. "Please eat." She hesitated before selecting a piece of bread, her fingers barely trembling. The rich flavors turned to ash in her mouth. Behind her, something moved. A shadow fell across the table. "Do you like the dress?" "Yes," she managed, voice barely above a whisper. "Stand." Her knees wobbled as she obeyed. The creature moved forward, revealing its hand. Except it wasn't a hand, but a massive grotesque appendage with long fingers ending in sharp claws. "Turn around," the beast said. She did slowly. Her gaze traveled upward and upward still. The sight was staggering. Before her stood a figure too massive, too distorted for this world. Its muzzle bristled with jagged teeth, its body twisted by agony and fury. Serena's lips parted, a scream building within her, but instead of a cry, what slipped out was, "Were you cursed?" The beast recoiled as if struck. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That was presumptuous." "No." The voice was quieter now, almost resigned. "How did you know?" She hesitated. "I've read many stories about curses. One about a royal twisted into brambles by a jealous witch. And she stopped herself. I'm rambling. No. The beast's gaze locked onto hers. Go on. So she did. One tale, then another, speaking of monsters and spells, of humanity hidden beneath horror. Hours passed. The candles guttered low. Thank you for your company, it rumbled at last, its voice softer, almost reluctant. Relief flooded her. It hadn't been so terrible. She had survived the night with the only thing she had, stories. Then will you be my wife? Serena's breath stilled. I cannot, she whispered, horrified. The beast rose, towering. Then I have no use for you, it said. The finality in those words sent ice through Serena's veins. Would the king have her executed for displeasing his monstrous companion? Panic clawed at her throat. But in that moment, her storyteller's mind worked faster than her fear. I am held by those who cannot touch me, broken by those who never speak me, and kept by those who never sought me. She blurted out, words tumbling forth. Kings command me, but I command fate. What am I? The beast paused, massive head tilting slightly. What is this? It growled. A riddle, Serena said, her voice steadier now. From a story I know. She lifted her chin, summoning every ounce of courage she possessed. If you can solve this riddle, then I will be yours, she tells the beast. And if I cannot, then until you do, I hope you will allow me to return to tell you more stories. The creature stared at her for what felt like eternity. Then, to her astonishment, it exhaled. Tomorrow night, then do not be late. When Serena returned to the servants' quarters, the room fell silent instantly. Wide-eyed, the other girls watched her cross the stone floor, pressing against the walls as if she carried a disease. The head servant, a woman with iron-grey hair, grabbed Serena's arm with surprising strength and pulled her into a small alcove away from the others. You're alive, she hissed, her face lined with disbelief. How? She cut herself off, glancing over her shoulder. Say nothing to anyone, not a word. Do you understand? The king will see you at noon. Serena nodded, noting how the woman's fingers trembled despite her stern demeanor. Her return had clearly shaken the castle's order. Sleep was elusive, her dreams haunted by amber eyes and unanswered riddles. She was jolted awake by rough hands. The sun was already high. A guard stood over her, his face unreadable beneath his helmet. The king demands your presence, he stated flatly. Now. She followed him through a labyrinth of corridors and up unfamiliar staircases to a private chamber. Not the throne room she expected, but a study filled with books. Inside, Alpha King Darius stood against a massive window bathed in sunlight. Only two others were there. Birdie, who avoided eye contact, and a man who looked like a warrior, likely the king's beater. Darius's eyes tracked her as she entered, studying her with cold calculation. Up close, the beauty that had struck her before seemed sharper, more dangerous in the daylight. Not a single imperfection marred his features, as if the gods themselves had carved him from marble and forgotten to make him human. So he began, his voice a mix of velvet and steel. You met my guest. What did you think? Serena lowered her gaze, bowing slightly. He was generous to me, as was your majesty, for choosing me as his slave. A flicker of curiosity, or was it suspicion, crossed Darius's face. And that is all you have to say? He probed lightly. His Majesty's guest has requested my presence again tonight. She answered softly, keeping her head down. Darius moved closer, his presence almost predatory. Will you go? He asked, his smile mocking. If it pleases your Majesty. I am indifferent to whether you or another entertains that thing, he said dismissively. Serena couldn't hide her reaction to the word thing. Darius noticed. Does my choice of words disturb you, slave? He leaned in. What word would you use to describe such a horrid beast? The room tensed. Your Majesty may of course use whichever words he pleases, Serena responded carefully. A heavy silence followed. Then impulsively she added. Although even beasts are allowed respect. The beater gasped and Birdie palled. Respect. Darius sneered, his pupils narrowing. That beast is a dark stain upon my castle. I allow enough respect by keeping him alive and fed." Serena bowed lower, staying silent as Darius circled her, each step measured. "The gown, the jewels, return them to Birdie," he ordered. "Everything in this castle belongs to me, and I will not allow a mere slave such luxury." She nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "And should you speak to anyone of the beast," he continued, his voice a threatening whisper, "I will know and I will have you killed immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty," she murmured, bowing again. He studied her a moment longer, then dismissed her with a wave. "Get her out of my sight." That night, as the castle fell into darkness and silence, Serena was led once more toward the oak door. This time, the guard didn't meet her eyes at all. Days melted into weeks as Serena's life settled into a strange new rhythm. Nights were spent in the beast's chambers, and days were filled with the duties of a castle slave. Each evening followed the same pattern. A beautiful gown awaited her. A feast was laid out, and she told stories until the candles burned low. "What tale do you have for me tonight?" The beast would rumble, settling his massive form across from her. She would weave her stories, always careful to leave them unfinished. And then, he would press as she paused. Tomorrow, she would promise with a hint of a smile. By day, her life was altogether different. Though permitted to sleep later than the others, by noon she was on her knees scrubbing floors, her fingers raw from lye soap and cold water. "Mr. Spot," Birdie would say, pointing to an invisible imperfection. "Start again." The other servants avoided her, their initial curiosity having curdled into something uglier. "Disease carrier," whispered a kitchen maid. "That's why she's still alive." "She thinks she's better than us now," an older servant muttered. "The kings," suggested another. Serena bore their words in silence. Being alone was nothing new. She'd been isolated her entire life. Occasionally she would encounter King Darius in the corridors. Sometimes he ignored her entirely. Other times his perfect lip would curl in disgust. "Still alive, I see," he remarked once. "My guest must have peculiar tastes." The servants whispered about him constantly, their voices hushed and fearful. "He killed his own father," they say. An elderly gardener confided to another. "I heard it was his mother who died first," came the reply. More rumors circulated of rivals who challenged him and were never seen again, of servants executed for trivial errors. True or not, fear of Alpha King Darius permeated every corner of the castle. Her days weren't pleasant, but her nights Serena grew to almost enjoy. Though after weeks of borrowed tales, her repertoire began to run thin. "I'm not sure I have a story tonight," she admitted one evening. The beast tilted his head. "You always have a story." Serena hesitated. The books she'd read in her village had been very limited, her father disinclined to spend any money on more. "I could perhaps tell you one of mine," she suggested. "Yours?" The beast went still. That night began a transformation in their relationship. No longer was she merely reciting tales. She was creating them. And the beast was her first true audience. He questioned plot holes, debated character motivations, suggested unexpected twists. But why would the princess trust him after he was so cruel to her? He challenged one night. "Because sometimes," Serena replied, "we see beyond what others have done to who they truly are." The beast grew quiet at that. "And you believe that? That people can change so fundamentally?" "I believe people can reveal who they truly were all along," Serena said softly. "Sometimes cruelty is just armor." His golden eyes studied her intently. "You speak as if you know something of armor yourself." She did. The armor of indifference she'd worn when her mate cast her aside. The armor of resignation when her father offered her up like damaged goods. But she only smiled and continued her tale. Their conversations grew longer, deeper, stretching from sunset until the early hours before dawn. Sometimes she would catch herself laughing at his dry observations. Sometimes he would growl in pleasure at a particularly clever turn of phrase. One night the beast surprised her. "I have something for you," he said, rising from his chair. He led her through a door she'd never noticed before, revealing a circular chamber lined floor to ceiling with books. A writing desk sat by the window, stocked with fine parchment, quills, and ink. A library. Serena breathed, turning in a slow circle. For me. You mentioned. Your father wouldn't buy you books, the beast said, almost shy. I thought perhaps you might like to read new stories. Write your own. Tears pricked her eyes. No one had ever given her such a gift. Thank you, she whispered. From that night forward, their discussions became even richer. She would read during the day when her duties allowed, and at night they would debate philosophy, dissect character arcs, argue over plot devices. Your heroine is too forgiving, he said one evening as she read from a story she'd written. No one forgives so easily. Perhaps she's learned that holding on to anger hurts her more than the person who wronged her, Serena replied. Or perhaps she's afraid of being alone again, he countered gently. She looked up, startled by his insight. Maybe both. The beast leaned forward in his chair. Tell me about her. About why forgiveness comes so easily to someone who's been hurt. Serena sat down her pages, her throat tight. She was cast aside by someone who was supposed to love her, told she was broken, worthless. When someone finally shows her kindness, she's terrified of losing it. Why was she cast aside? The question hung in the air. Serena's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. She couldn't give him what he wanted most. She said quietly, a child. She tried for 5 years, but her body, it wouldn't cooperate. So, he called her defective and sent her back to her father like a broken tool. The beast's sharp intake of breath made her look up. His golden eyes blazed with something fierce and protective. He was a fool, he said, his voice rough with emotion. To cast aside someone so precious for something beyond her control. Was he? Serena asked, tears threatening. In our world, what is a woman who can't bear pups? What purpose does she serve? What purpose? The beast rose, pacing to the window. She tells stories that make the darkness bearable. She sees past monster to the soul within. She brings light to places that have known only shadow. Serena wiped her eyes. At least you won't want to marry me now, I imagine, she said with a broken laugh. Now that you know I'm truly as defective as they say. The beast whirled around, his massive form trembling with intensity. Serena, I would count myself the most fortunate creature alive if you would have me. Child or no child, you are. He stopped as if catching himself before saying too much. You are worth more than a kingdom of queens who possess everything but your gentle heart, he finished quietly. Heat flooded Serena's cheeks, her heart hammering against her ribs. No one had ever spoken to her with such fervor, such conviction. I don't, she stammered, looking away from his burning gaze. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her gown, and she felt suddenly acutely aware of every inch of space between them. You don't have to say such things to be kind. I'm not being kind, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm being honest. She ducked her head, overwhelmed by the weight of his regard, by the way he looked at her as if she were something precious rather than broken. For perhaps the first time, Serena was happy. The castle that had seemed a prison now felt closer to a sanctuary. Only one shadow darkened her contentment. A question which came every night. Will you be my wife? And each night she'd reply, I am held by those who cannot touch me, broken by those who never speak me, and kept by those who never sought me. Kings command me, but I command fate. What am I? At first she had feared the consequences of her subtle refusal. Now what truly haunted her were those intelligent golden eyes flashing raw with anguish at her subtle refusal. But when she'd imagined herself saying yes, entertained the thought because he was her dear friend, and no one but him had ever treated her so kindly, the thought of those massive misshapen limbs entwining with hers in the marriage bed made her stomach heave with primal terror. What am I? She'd repeat. The beast. Would stay silent, and the next day, everything would start anew. One morning, instead of being sent to scrub floors, Serena was led to a small chamber tucked away in a quiet corner of the castle. Inside stood a simple desk with a chair, a stack of blank parchment, several quills, and a pot of ink. His Majesty says you're to spend your days here now, readying yourself for your nightly duties, Birdie explained. Serena stared in disbelief. I'm to write. Whatever keeps that thing. Entertained, Birdie muttered before leaving her alone with the precious gift of paper and time. Serena ran her fingers over the smooth parchment, heart swelling. No one had ever given her such a gift. In her village, paper was scarce. Ink, a luxury her father would never waste on her stories. That night, Serena entered the beast's chambers quietly, clutching pages covered in her careful script. The usual words of greeting died on her lips as emotion swelled unexpectedly in her chest. I wrote something different tonight, she said softly. May I read it to you? The beast settled his massive form across from her, the chair groaning beneath his weight. Please. Her voice wavered as she began. Once there lived a girl born without a wolf. In a village where everyone could shift. She alone remained human, trapped in a single skin. Serena paused, swallowing hard. Her father called her defective. Her sister pretended not to know her when others were watching. The village children threw stones and called her half-breed. The beast remained motionless, only his eyes betraying his attention. Each night, she would escape into stories, creating worlds where she belonged, where being different wasn't a curse. Serena's voice grew steadier, stronger. No one ever asked to hear these stories. No one cared about the world she built, word by careful word. Those who rejected her for lacking a wolf were fools, the beast interrupted. A wolf is nothing compared to a mind that creates worlds. Serena looked up, startled. Is that how the story ends? He asked. I don't know yet, she admitted. Silence fell between them, charged with something Serena couldn't name. Today, for the first time, someone gave my stories value, she whispered. You asked the king, who clearly despises you, to give me time and space to write. No one has ever. Her voice broke. No one has ever seen me before. Not until you. The beast's massive claws flexed and relaxed as if he wished to reach for her, but dared not. I see nothing but you, Serena. The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine. Will you be my wife? He asked, the familiar question laden with new weight. Serena's breath caught. Her heart raced. The silence stretched between them, fragile. Serena? The beast asked. She looked at him, truly looked at the massive misshapen form, the twisted limbs, the scarred hide. And beyond that, to the mind she'd come to know, the gentle wit, the thoughtful questions, the careful way he never pushed when she said no. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. I am held by those who cannot touch me, broken by those who never speak me, and kept by those who never sought me, she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. What am I? There was a beat of silence through which the beast met her eyes, and then his shoulders drooped in defeat. As she left, her heart felt heavier than it ever had upon departing his chambers. Later, sleep eluded her. Serena stared into the darkness, remembering every moment of her life before the castle, the crushing loneliness of being the only one who couldn't shift. The painful silence when she entered a room. The way her father's eyes slid past her as if looking directly at his defective daughter might somehow make her real. Then came the beast. The beast who spent time listening to her, who'd arranged a space for her to write. Tonight he'd called her storytelling more valuable than a wolf's strength. A memory surfaced. The beast asking about her protagonist's choice to forgive someone who'd hurt her deeply. Because sometimes, she'd answered, we see beyond what others have done to who they truly are. Wasn't that exactly what had happened between them? She had seen beyond the monstrous exterior to the person within, and he had seen her, really seen her, when no one else bothered to look. Serena sat up suddenly, heart pounding. The truth crashed over her like a wave. She loved him, not with the cautious affection one might feel for a friend, but with the soul-deep certainty of recognition, of finding someone who understood the language of her heart without translation. She had to tell him. Now, before the sun rose, before courage failed her, before another day passed without him knowing that his question finally had a different answer, the castle corridors were silent in the pre-dawn hours. When she reached the beast's chambers, the guard slumped against the wall, snoring softly. She slipped past him without difficulty. Inside, morning light had just begun to filter through the heavy curtains. The beast lay asleep on his massive bed, and Serena approached quietly, heart pounding. She would wake him, tell him, yes, be his wife. But then the first ray of sunlight streaked across the bed, and suddenly the beast's body contorted. A groan escaped him, his limbs twisted, fur receded, bones cracked and reshaped. Serena pressed a hand to her mouth. Where the beast had been, King Darius now lay, his perfect face relaxed in sleep, his chest rising and falling steadily. The contrast was breathtaking, from monster to divine beauty in moments that without thinking she reached out, fingers hovering just above his cheek. His eyes snapped open. For one heartbeat, he smiled at her, a genuine smile that transformed his severe features into something so beautiful it stole her breath. Then awareness dawned. His gaze darted to the sunlight, back to her face. The smile died. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said, voice hollow. "Your Majesty," she whispered. Your Darius sat up slowly, resignation replacing shock. "A witch's curse," he explained, not meeting her eyes. "By day, the king everyone fears. By night, the monster everyone pities. Neither form truly me. The curse will only be broken when I find a love stronger than that born for a king. Or in other words, when someone falls in love with the beast, knowing nothing of the king within." "I came to say yes," Serena blurted out. "I was going to accept." "Enough," he cut her off. "Now that you know whatever you feel is tainted, you've seen both sides. You love a king, not a beast. But I didn't know when I decided." Serena began. "It doesn't matter." The king turned away. "You should go." By afternoon, Serena found herself in a carriage, watching the castle recede into the distance. A year passed in the cottage by the forest's edge. Seasons changed. Flowers bloomed and withered. Leaves fell and grew anew. Serena had everything she had once dreamed of. A quiet room with east-facing windows, a writing desk, shelves lined with books, and misery. A constant hollow ache that no amount of written words could fill. She wrote prolifically, filling page after page with tales of cursed princes, of misunderstood beasts, of love that transcended form. But each story remained incomplete because without him to question her plots, to challenge her character motivations, to laugh at her unexpected twists, the words felt hollow. The village folk were kind enough, if distant. They called her the king's woman. Isolation was nothing new to Serena, but this solitude cut deeper, for now she knew what it meant to be truly seen, truly heard, and then to lose it. The news came on a late summer's day, carried by the baker's wife as Serena purchased her weekly bread. "You've heard, I suppose," the woman asked, eyes bright with gossip's gleam. "About the royal wedding?" Serena's heart stumbled. "Wedding? Oh, yes. The Alpha King is to marry Princess of the Eastern Territories. A powerful alliance, they say." The woman leaned closer. "The ceremony will be held in the town square next week, a public spectacle so all might witness. The entire kingdom is invited." That night, Serena stood before her mirror and made her decision. She would go, not to disrupt or plead, but simply to see him one last time. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, as if the heavens themselves blessed the union. Serena dressed carefully in her finest gown, simple by noble standards, but finer than anything she'd owned in her village life. By midday, the town square had transformed into a spectacle of royal extravagance. Banners in royal blue and gold hung from every building. Garlands of summer flowers draped across makeshift pavilions. Guards in gleaming armor stood at attention, their expressions stern beneath their helmets. Serena found a place along the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind a broad-shouldered farmer and his family. From here she could see without being seen, or so she hoped. The assembled nobility arrived first, a parade of silks and jewels and carefully arranged smiles. Then came the bride's procession. Princess was everything Serena was not. Tall, imperious, with the confident grace of one born to power. The crowd sighed in appreciation. Serena's throat tightened. Of course, he would choose such a mate. Beautiful, powerful, worthy of an alpha king. Had the princess succeeded where she had failed? Hadara somehow broken the curse that bound him. The sun had not yet set. There was no way to know for certain. A hush fell over the square as the royal fanfare sounded. King Darius appeared at the far end of the aisle that had been created through the crowd, resplendent in royal blue and silver, his dark hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. He moved with the fluid grace she remembered, head high, shoulders squared, every inch the perfect ruler. But Serena saw what others did not. The slight tension around his eyes, the careful blankness of his expression, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides before he forced them to relax. This was not merely the cold, perfect king the crowd saw. This was her beast, the one who had listened to her stories, who had given her paper and quills, who had asked her again and again to be his wife. As Darius took his place at the altar, waiting for his bride, something in Serena's chest cracked open. She knew him, truly knew him, in a way this princess, with her perfect hair and perfect lineage, never could. She knew his wit, his capacity for gentleness. She knew how his eyes lit up at a clever plot twist, how he grew still when deeply moved by a story's turn. Near her, a burly man shifted, drawing her attention. Something about his movement seemed off, too controlled, too deliberate. His eyes scanned the guards, calculating. With a start, Serena realized he wasn't watching the ceremony at all, but studying the security arrangements. Across the square, she spotted another man doing the same, his hand resting too casually near a concealed weapon. A chill ran through her. Something was wrong. The royal officiant began the traditional vows. Serena watched through a veil of tears as Darius stood rigid, his face a perfect mask of composure. Then, suddenly, inexplicably, his gaze lifted from his bride and swept across the crowd. Their eyes met. For one heartbeat, his perfect composure shattered. Pain flashed across his features, raw and unguarded. His face palled, his lips parted slightly as if to speak. Then, with visible effort, he tore his gaze away, returning his attention to the princess beside him. Serena forced her lips into a trembling smile, hoping he had seen it, hoping he understood she wished him happiness, even as her heart crumbled to dust within her chest. The vows continued. The sun inched lower in the sky. The suspicious men in the crowd shifted subtly, moving into new positions. And then chaos erupted. The first scream split the air like lightning. Then came the clash of steel, the snarls of shifting wolves, and the thundering of boots as royal guards rushed to protect their king and his bride. Protect His Majesty. The captain's voice rose above the den. Guards surrounded Princess Ara, whisking her away through a side street. But Darius remained. He drew his sword, the blade flashing in the late afternoon sun. All around Serena, people shoved and pushed. Someone knocked her to the ground. From her position on the cobblestones, the battle took on a nightmarish quality. Some attackers shifted, their bodies contorting as fur erupted from skin. Massive wolves leapt into the fray. Fangs bared. Royal guards transformed to meet them. The conflict escalating from sword play to a primal battle of beasts. But Darius fought with steel alone. He fought with the same grace she'd seen in the beast. She realized different forms, same soul. An archer on a nearby roof took aim at the king's unprotected back. Without thought, Serena burst from hiding. She raced across the blood-slicked cobblestones, colliding with Darius just as the arrow whistled through the air. Where he had stood, they crashed to the ground together. His eyes, those familiar eyes she'd gazed into so many nights, widened in shock. "Serena," he breathed, meeting her eyes. "You were about to be shot," she replied, gesturing toward the rooftop. Darius shoved her behind him. "Go, please," he pressed. His beater appeared, blood streaking his face. "Your Majesty, the sun, you must retreat now." Serena glanced westward. The sun hung low, a bloated red orb mere minutes from disappearing. The curse wasn't broken. The beater tugged at Darius's arm. "My lord, there's no time." A massive wolf lunged at Serena, knocking her to the ground. Teeth snapped inches from her throat. She twisted, fighting, but the wolf's weight pinned her down. Another attacker standing beside the wolf spoke for him. "Stand down, Your Majesty," he called, voice distorted. "Or watch her die." Darius froze, sword half raised. The beater grabbed his arm. "My lord, the sun. You must go." "Let her go," Darius commanded, his voice deadly calm. The sun touched the horizon, its lower edge disappearing. "My king," the beater pleaded. "There's no time." Darius shook him off, eyes never leaving Serena. Something shifted in his expression. "Take her," the attacker growled, dragging Serena backward. "No!" Darius roared, lunging forward. The sun vanished. Darius stumbled, a cry of paining from his throat. His sword clattered to the cobblestones, his body contorted, the fine wedding clothes straining at the seams. The gasps and screams around them rose as nobles and commoners alike witnessed their king's transformation. His spine arched unnaturally, bones cracked and shifted. His perfectly handsome face elongated, teeth sharpening, jaw unhinging. Fur erupted across his skin, scales forming in patches. His elegant fingers curved into razor claws. The crowd recoiled in horror. Princess, who had been fighting her guards to return, froze at the sight, her face draining of color. But Darius paid them no mind. His focus remained entirely on Serena. The beast that was Darius launched himself at her captor with ferocity. No hesitation, no concern for who witnessed his monstrous form, only rage at the threat to Serena. The attacker released her, shifting fully to meet this new threat. But he was no match for Darius's beast form. Around them, the battle paused as even the attackers gaped at the revelation. Royal guards regained control, driving back the remaining rebels as Darius tore into their leader. It ended quickly. The attacking alpha lay dead. And in the center of the town square stood the beast, massive, grotesque, covered in blood not his own. Golden eyes sweeping the crowd. He staggered, a pained growl escaping him. Blood seeped from a wound where an arrow had found its mark. His massive legs trembled. Serena approached the beast. Her beast, her king, without fear. "You're hurt," she said softly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. They saw. This is my fault." The beast shook his massive head. "I don't care what they saw, what they think." He winced as pain lanced through him. "As long as you're safe." Serena placed her hands on either side of his muzzle. "I love you," she said. "Beast or king, I love you." Something changed in the air, a charge like lightning about to strike. Light emanated from within him, pulsing brighter with each labored breath. The transformation began. Fur receding, bones shifting, the grotesque features melting away. Unlike his usual painful transformation, this one seemed gentler. When it finished, Darius stood before her in human form, though the sun had long set. His wedding finery hung in tatters, but his body was whole, the arrow wound healed. "I don't understand," he whispered. "The curse. Only when you find a love stronger than that born for a king will you be free," Serena quoted. "That's what the witch told you, isn't it?" "You misunderstood," she continued gently. "It wasn't about finding someone who could love the beast more than the king. It was about you loving someone else more than you loved being king." Understanding dawned on Darius's face. "When I chose to save you over preserving my secret," he began. "You showed that you loved me more than your pride," she finished. "That's what broke the curse." Around them, the crowd murmured. The princess had vanished. His beater approached cautiously, disbelief written across his features. But Darius saw only Serena. In the middle of the ruined wedding, he pulled her into his arms. She came willingly, her hands reaching up to frame his face, the face she had known in two forms, the soul she had recognized in both. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "Beast and king, both parts of me love you." Serena pressed closer, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers. The crowd, the chaos, the blood, all of it receded until there was only this. Two people who had seen beyond form to the truth of each other's hearts. Epilogue. 1 year later, the royal ballroom glittered with candle light, and across the polished marble floor, both human and shifter danced together in unprecedented harmony. Queen Serena stood at the edge of the revelry, watching her mate move through the crowd. No longer did fear follow in his wake. Instead, Smiles and genuine bows greeted Alpha King Darius as he stopped to speak with each guest. So much had changed in a year. The castle that had once been a place of whispered terrors now opened its doors to all. The servants no longer cowered. The hierarchy that had kept humans beneath wolves had dissolved under their joint rule. After the wedding day revelation, many truths had come to light. He had never been truly cruel. Merely desperate to keep his curse hidden, preferring to be feared than closely observed. Those servants who had attended his special guest and never returned, simply relocated to distant villages with generous pensions to ensure their silence. The truth behind the curse had spread quickly. How the witch, scorned by his younger self, had split him in two, forcing him to live half his life as the thing he feared most. A beast who could never be respected, only feared. A fitting punishment for a prince who had valued appearance and power above all else. But the curse's breaking had transformed more than just Darius. It had changed the kingdom itself. And then there was the miracle that still made Serena's heart race with wonder. 3 months after their wedding, she had felt the first flutter of life within her womb. The physicians had been baffled. The same woman they'd pronounced barren now carried not 1 but 2 healthy babes. The prince and princess now slept peacefully in the royal nursery above. Serena liked to think it was love that had worked the miracle. Her husband had married her knowing she might never give him an heir, had chosen her despite what the world called her greatest failing. Perhaps that kind of love, pure, unconditional, transformative, had been powerful enough to heal what everyone believed was permanently broken. Serena paused as she neared her husband, overhearing his conversation with a visiting diplomat. "A riddle, Your Majesty," the diplomat was saying. "They say you're quite skilled at them." "I enjoy a good puzzle," Darius admitted with a smile. "Very well. I am held by those who cannot touch me, broken by those who never speak me, and kept by those who never sought me. Kings command me, but I command fate. What am I?" Serena froze, her breath catching. Her riddle, the one she'd posed on that first terrifying night when she'd been certain she would die. Darius's eyes flickered toward her, a small smile playing at his lips. "That's simple," he replied. "A promise." The diplomat laughed, impressed, and moved on to another conversation. Serena approached, unable to hide her surprise. "You knew the answer," she said quietly. "All this time." Darius took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Since the first night you asked me. But you said you didn't. I didn't want to force you to marry me. Curse or no curse." He drew her onto the dance floor, their movements perfectly in sync. "I love you," he murmured against her temple, "my storyteller, my queen." "And I love you," she replied. "My beast, my king." One soul in perfect harmony at last. "Hey everyone, before we wrap up, I've got a little surprise for you. I'm sharing a short preview of a brand new exclusive story that you can only find on my Patreon. It's about Cecilia, a fierce jaguar shifter, and Zach, the cocky wolf shifter she swears she can't stand until their families arrange their marriage and he suddenly splits into 3 versions of himself. The rebel, the noble, and the wolf. But first, let's have some fun. Drop your favorite quote from today's story in the comments, and I'll randomly pick one of you to win 1 free month of Patreon access. I'll announce the winner in next week's video. Alright, ready? Here's your sneak peek. Enjoy. Chapter 4. The brush glides through Cecilia's hair with practiced precision. Exactly 50 strokes. No more, no less. Control, order. These are the things that have always anchored her, especially in moments of chaos. And what could be more chaotic than having one's entire future hijacked by parental decree? By now, word of the arrangement will have spread through campus like wildfire. Shifter society thrives on gossip, and an engagement between the Lawrence heir and the Dalton playboy is prime fodder. But even as she mentally rehearses the cool dismissals she'll offer to anyone bold enough to ask about the engagement, another thought intrudes. One she's been trying desperately to suppress since last night. Zach's face on that terrace, the brief flash of something in his eyes before he'd masked it. Not anger or relief as she'd expected, but something that had looked disturbingly like hurt. "You know, I always thought you couldn't stand me because of my family. But that was never it, was it?" She slams her brush down harder than intended, annoyed at herself for remembering his exact words, for wondering if perhaps she'd been unnecessarily cruel. "Don't be ridiculous," she mutters to her reflection. "It's not your job to cuddle his ego." Still, a small voice whispers that there's a difference between honesty and cruelty. They are technically engaged, at least for now. Perhaps she owes him a modicum of civility, a private conversation where they can discuss how to handle this situation like the adults they're supposed to be. That flash of hurt in his golden eyes before he turned away. Had she really hurt him? The possibility makes her stomach twist uncomfortably. It shouldn't matter. It doesn't matter, except she finds herself rehearsing what she might say to him. "Dalton, while I maintain that this arrangement is unacceptable, perhaps I was unnecessarily harsh last night." No, that sounds like an admission of wrongdoing. "Dalton, regardless of our personal feelings, we should present a united front," until she sigh, frustrated with herself. Why is this so difficult? Why does the thought of facing him make her palms damp and her heart beat faster? Because in 3 years of verbal sparring, she'd never seen him look at her like that, like she had the power to wound him, like he cared what she thought. "This is ridiculous," she mutters, smoothing her already perfect skirt. With a final critical glance at her reflection, Cecilia gathers her books and heads for the door, ignoring the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "It's just Dalton," she tells herself. The same arrogant, infuriating boy she's known for years. Nothing to be nervous about. She'll find him. They'll establish ground rules for managing this unfortunate situation, and then she can focus on finding a way out of it. "Cecilia. Oh my God, is it true?" The excited squeal cuts through her thoughts. Melissa hurries toward her, dark eyes wide with barely contained excitement. "I don't know what you mean," Cecilia replies, her voice deliberately calm as she continues walking. "You and Zach Dalton," Melissa persists, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that's barely quieter than her normal volume. "The engagement, everyone's talking about it." Cecilia stops abruptly, forcing Melissa to halt mid-stride. "Keep your voice down," she hisses, glancing around. "How did you even hear about that?" "Eliza's cousin works as a server at the restaurant where you had dinner," Melissa explains undeterred. "She saw your families there last night." Her eyes narrow, studying Cecilia's face. "You're not happy about it," she observes. "Have you seen Dalton this morning?" Cecilia says instead of confirming the obvious. A knowing look crosses Melissa's face. "You're not the only one who's not thrilled about this match, apparently," she says with barely suppressed glee. "What do you mean?" Cecilia asks, a flicker of unease stirring in her chest. "Well," Melissa leans closer. "According to Fiona, Zach and his crew hit up a club last night after your dinner. And not just for a casual drink. Apparently, your fiancé got so wasted he could barely stand, they practically had to carry him out at closing time." Something cold and unpleasant settles in Cecilia's stomach. While she'd spent the night tossing and turning, wrestling with guilt over her harsh words. He'd been out partying. "Well, I'm glad to hear he's taking our engagement so seriously," Cecilia says, ice-coating every syllable. "If you'll excuse me." She strides away, her earlier intention to approach Dalton, civilly evaporating like morning dew. The audacity of the man to go on a bender the very night of their engagement. What if it had been reported to the Shifter Society pages? Everything he does now reflects on her. And if he thinks for 1 second that she'll tolerate his debauched lifestyle while they're publicly linked. "Cecilia." The voice stops her in her tracks. She knows that voice, has heard it call her name in academic debates and heated arguments for 3 years. She turns, the cutting remark already forming on her lips, and freezes. Zach Dalton is hurrying toward her. His uniform is impeccable. Shirt crisply pressed, tie perfectly knotted, shoes polished to a shine. His hair, usually a deliberate mess, is neatly combed. And he's carrying flowers. "Where do you think you're going?" she demands, the words tumbling out before she can stop them. Is he seriously off to give some conquest flowers while they're technically engaged? The thought dies abruptly when he smiles. At her. It's not his usual smile, the cocky grin or the carefully calculated charm she's witnessed him deploy on countless others. This smile is soft, sincere. It transforms his entire face, reaches his eyes in a way she's never seen before. And then to her utter astonishment, he blushes. His eyes drop to the bouquet in his hands. White lilies and blue irises arranged with obvious care. "These are for you," he continues, holding them out. "I heard they were your favorite." Cecilia stares at the flowers, momentarily speechless before she remembers what her dear fiancé has been up to. "If this is your way of apologizing for your night of debauchery, you don't have to bother," she says, her chin lifting slightly. "I'm sorry." Zach blinks, confusion crossing his features. The genuine bewilderment in his expression catches her off guard. He looks truly lost, as if he has no idea what she's talking about. "Last night," she clarifies, studying his face closely. "The club. Your celebration." "I didn't go to any club last night," he says, still looking genuinely perplexed. She narrows her eyes. Either he's a phenomenal actor or he was so drunk he doesn't even remember. "Would you like to have breakfast together?" he asks, the hopeful note in his voice throwing her further off balance. Not because of what our parents want, he rushes to add as if sensing her hesitation. "I always want to spend time with you," he trails off, looking startled by his own admission. Her traitorous heart skips a beat. "You do?" she asks. "I mean, that is to say," he takes a deep breath, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "I'm aware you're not very inclined toward me," but their eyes meet and in his gaze makes her breath catch. There's such earnestness there, such genuine emotion. Nothing like the calculated charm she's accustomed to from Zach Dalton. "Cecilia, good God, man. Close your mouth. You'll catch a fly." The drawling voice cuts through the moment like a knife. Cecilia turns toward the interruption and feels her heart skip a beat. Slouching against a nearby pillar is Zach Dalton. At least it looks exactly like him. But this version couldn't be more different from the one standing before her with flowers. This Zach is the epitome of disheveled attraction. Tie missing entirely, the top few buttons of his shirt undone to reveal the strong column of his throat. His hair is tasseled wildly. He stands with arrogant ease, jacket slung over one shoulder, regarding them both with undisguised amusement. "You certainly won't catch her with that attitude," he continues, sauntering toward them. "Are those flowers embarrassing?" The first Zach, the neat, earnest one, straightens. "There's nothing embarrassing about giving flowers to someone you care about," he says firmly. The newcomer rolls his eyes before turning his attention fully to Cecilia. And the way he looks at her. She's seen Zach Dalton's flirtatious glances before, witnessed him charm countless girls with carefully measured attention. But this is different. This is raw, undisguised hunger. "Hello, darling," he says, leaning in close. "Missed me?" Cecilia takes an instinctive step back. "Oh my God." Melissa's voice cuts through her confusion. Cecilia had forgotten her friend was even there. "There are two of them." "Since when are there two of them?" The flowers trembled slightly in Cecilia's grasp as she looked between the two identical faces, each wearing expressions she'd never seen on Zach Dalton before. Something was very, very wrong. And judging by the heat rising to her cheeks under their combined attention, something was very, very dangerous. This was a preview of the good, the bad, and the beastly, available on my Patreon. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next week for my next story. Love, Lily.